Okay, so we're live, hopefully in the right place, in the When Women Speak group, and we're also recording in case we want to use this recording later on. So, Leanne, thank you so much for offering to have this conversation about embodying the feminine and all other aspects of what that means, I guess. So how I've come to know Leanne is through her work with Waking the Wild Feminine, and it's a beautiful, I don't even want to call it a course. I'm not sure, maybe Leanne can say what what it's called. It doesn't really feel like a course because it feels more like just a rite of passage, a returning home to yourself, and it's made up of beautiful practices to follow and coming together in circle. There's 8 women who take part, and it's absolutely magical. And I don't say that in I don't say that word magical lightly. It's profound. Just from saying that I wanted to take part, making the commitment to take part, things started to shift noticeably, physiologically, emotionally. Nicola, the co-founder of When Women Speak, noticed a change in how I was showing up. I mean, and this was before the program had even started. So maybe also Leanne can kind of like explain a little bit about what's going on there as well. I've given Leanne some questions that I want, that I'm curious to have talked about, and Leanne will have her own things that she wants to cover. But one of the things I wanted to just say at the beginning, to put forward where I'm coming from with this. So I've been on this journey of discovery, uncovering who I am, what's going on, and that, I mean, that's been ongoing since I can remember, really, standing in the mirror and kind of looking at and sort of saying, who are you? You know, and kind of not really understanding who I was supposed to be, knowing that I was somebody other than the name I'd been given. And yes, I've been on this kind of search as to who am I, and that led to this dissolving, I guess, of everything I thought I was, and a knowing of the emptiness I am, which I know sounds strange, it's calling it emptiness, but that's what it looked like and felt like, and is known to be this utter emptiness and aloneness. And it was the one thing I feared most, was being alone. But actually, in discovering this empty aloneness, there was freedom and so much. And then what I've come to see is I want to, within that emptiness, I know is fullness, I know is everything. And I want to take that empty fullness out into the world. And that was the piece that I was really struggling with. And everything that I was coming across seemed to be taking me on this kind of transcendent journey, to, you know, sort of away from humanity. And I knew that wasn't it. I knew that wasn't it, because I knew that there's no separation with anything. So there has to be this embodiment of everything, the knowing of who we are, and then taking that out into the world. And then Leanne appeared.
Like magic.
Like magic. And I'm starting now to be able to fully embrace and own what that power, that fullness is to take out into the world. And it's, oh my goodness, it's so exciting and delicious. So yeah, Leanne, would you like to share a little bit about who you are, whatever you feel drawn to say in this moment, and then we'll go from there. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for such a deep and heartfelt, I guess, sharing of your truth, but also I felt very seen in that too. So thank you very much for that. Um, it's I'm really present to noticing in this moment that the things I'm going to share, I never know for sure what I'm going to say until I say it, but I think what I'm planning to share um, during this hour together are things that I speak about all the time in Waking the Wild Feminine. This idea of the descent into our bodies, into the feminine, into our souls. And the things I speak about all the time in kind of these closed containers, particularly in circle. And that's something that I've been increasingly doing over the years. And yet there's been this sense of, and this I think we'll probably get into more in a moment, where there's a point where that doesn't feel safe. It feels too revealed. It feels like I'm showing more of myself than feels safe, or to an audience that doesn't feel safe. So this is really interesting that I offered to do this webinar for your group, and knowing already that was a kind of a shift outside what felt comfortable for me. And then a couple of days ago, I just had this sense, you know what, I'm not even going to hold back. I'm just going to turn up, like really be my message and be wild, show all of me. The kimono's open. So I my work and that of Primal Happiness, the organization I run with my business partner, Jonathan Wilkinson, is very much about these initiations into adulthood, into sovereignty, into a soul-led life. And I love the way you were kind of grappling for, like, what's the word there? Is it a course? It doesn't feel like it is quite a course. And we do very much see it as like it's a rite of passage. It's an initiation that's very much lacking in today's culture. And it's firstly that we don't even know that path's available. I love what you said about the idea that you are kind of feeling this, not even a pull, but these kind of like the paths all kept leading to forms of transcendence. And that's what I see. And that was definitely my path. And then it's like recognizing there's something else too. It doesn't devalue the path to transcendence. That has real power too. But this call, this invitation down into our bodies, into the earth, into the feminine, and into our soul is equally precious and needed if we're going to become the fullness of who we came here to be. So that's really what our work's about, whether that be Waking the Wild Feminine or the other programs we offer that are kind of more one-to-one work. They are all really these initiations that we see on, they're not completely missing, but they're certainly rare. They're certainly rare in today's world. So I love everything you said, because it kind of like almost like, yes, that's exactly what it is, Sarah. And I don't often actually say it directly like that. So I love the fact that you realize that yourself. Yeah, so I think I would love to, it was always how I prefer to work best, is kind of co-create with you on this. So I know that you already have some questions that you were thinking you would like me to talk to. And of course, if there's anything that feels really alive for you in this moment, I love that kind of co-creative process where I'm going to speak to whatever's like most interesting, most juicy, most alive for you. So I'll hand back to you. And then if there's anything you want me to talk to, even if it wasn't on that list, let me know.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, the word that popped up the minute that you were saying about, are there any questions, was I don't know now. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to pronounce it correctly. That's so funny. The patriarchy, because I in part feel like that this journey of, it's almost like the patriarchal system that we're in has almost is like owning the journey of our expansion, if that makes sense. It's almost like this very masculine way of being in the world. And I'm curious as to how this embodying the feminine works with, or what's going on there in terms of the patriarchy, this system that we're in, and the work that you do and embodying the feminine? What can you talk to that a little bit, please?
Yeah. So the first thing that I feel really present to is that I don't use that work very much in my, I don't use that word very much in my work. And I don't think it's because I can't pronounce it. We'll see. It might be. But it's, I think my tendency typically is to look at the possibility, look at where we're trying to go. And even if that's a reclamation, focus on the reclamation, not what we're trying to reclaim from, if that makes sense. I mean, sometimes I will give language to things like domestication or taming. But for me, that's more helpful to recognize this isn't, I think even the name patriarchy kind of in itself has this sense of making wrong men and the masculine. And as you know, so much of my work is to look at the purity of the underlying energies of masculine and feminine. And so that's not in any way to kind of bypass or dismiss the kind of current mess, really, that's been created by that system. But what I prefer to do is look at it more as an overall system of domestication that actually serves none of us. I was looking at an interview with one of my favorite authors, Marion Woodman, earlier this morning, and she just happened to be talking about patriarchy, and I haven't noticed her to talk about it much either, so it's interesting that that's come up. And she was saying very similar, men suffer in that system just as much as women. And she used the word handle. She said she didn't go deeply into it, she said, but she sees like how that system handles men. And I can really see it as a kind of is similar, but in different ways, is a kind of real tamping down, a trapping, again, domestication of all of us in that system. And whether it's that system or anything else, the more energy we put into that, looking at it, focusing on it, try to take it down, the less energy we've got to actually put towards where we want to go, what the vision is for ourselves. Which again, as you know, so much of my work is actually returning inwards. Like that's really where the focus wants to be. Like, how do we go inwards into who we really are? And it's, I'd say, nigh on impossible to do that when our focus is constantly on what we're against. So let me just see if there's anything else. Yeah, so coming to your kind of like the deeper part of your question there around that path to, let's say, growth, it absolutely is a product of that domestication. I mean, when we look at those typical paths that we see in our culture, there'll be the, like the self-help, typical personal growth type things. And there'll be the kind of transcendence type things, whether that be Buddhism or anything else. And definitely within our culture, there is a real lack of any sense of this descent to the soul, which isn't surprising given, again, and you use the word masculine, our structure is very masculine, and the descent to the soul is a feminine journey. And so it's no wonder when we're losing a sense of the feminine and all the ways that's manifested, and like particularly our bodies, and particularly when we look at the disregard, disrespect, revulsion even that we've had culturally for a woman's body, and then how we can pretty much map that to how we've respected and disrespected really the earth. It's like no wonder that we've got no sense that journey is even possible. How can we possibly think that journey would even be a thing, let alone appealing, when we're seeing the body and the body of the earth as something that has no value? It's just, how could that possibly be a thing? So I think that's what I'm present to at the moment, but let me know if there's anything that you want to ask that kind of deepens into that.
I'll just see what comments that we've got. Just agreement really about that. It's seeing how it's hard to move forward if we're focusing on what we're against, and there's lots of examples of that, isn't there? I remember hearing about how Mother Teresa would say that she would go to a rally for peace but not an anti-war. So it's like, if you're focus on what it is that you're wanting, not what you're against. And I love that piece about how there's almost like if you think about how bodies are looked at in this kind of patriarchal system of objectifying and and how we've kind of like raped the earth and all of it's very interesting. Okay, I also would like, before we dive any further, just to see what caveat or wording you want to put around the conversation that we're going to be having, and in terms of gender, just to kind of like clear that, because I know there's been a couple of conversations in this group around gender. So when you're talking about masculine and feminine, and we will be talking about men and women, is there anything you can just kind of share to put it into some sort of context as we move forward with the conversation?
Yeah, for sure. And I realized that with this in itself, I've moved, and this is quite a recent shift. When I used to make caveats of this kind, I can see that I was doing really to protect myself. I realized that any conversation this kind is going to create some kind of activation. As you know, there's a kind of deeper whole conversation to have around activations, but let's say is likely to trigger people. And I used to do the caveats, I can see now, very much from a sense of not wanting to trigger people because I was scared of what that would mean for me. And I was feeling into this morning, thinking, this feels different now. I'll probably still want to give, I don't even know if the name is caveat now. It very much was that, and I don't feel like it is now. I just really want to create an open enough space that it feels safe for the women listening, that this holds something for them, where we're not needing to protect against what I'm saying, because it is going to go against some of the ways that we've culturally, particularly in the last, 40, 50 years, spoken about men, women, gender. And I think if we're still looking at it through that lens, that we're kind of looking at it in this kind of day-to-day modern world outside of this space, what I'm going to say is going to be quite counter to that. And I'm not doing that at all to provoke, to make wrong. It's very much more of an invitation into something that I think is it actually beyond primal. It's not even a kind of human biology point of view that I want to talk to. It's something even beyond that. Really what I'm wanting to talk about here, and I'll go into the meat of this in a moment, but we're really talking about archetypal energies, like as old as time. And so that's where I want to be having the conversation. And so if you're willing to meet me there, it's a very different conversation we can have. And so that's kind of like almost like not even a caveat. That's really like, that's the frame here that we're having this conversation within. With that said, again, when I'm talking about masculine, feminine, it really doesn't have anything to do with men and women directly, although I will speak in a moment where there are some places where I see there are kind of links or connections. I am very much talking about patterns of energy that have shown up in this particular formation even before, probably, I'm certain, humans were a thing. And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about, and I use archetypes in my work, as you know, Sarah. I often talk about the wild woman archetype, and I'll probably speak about that more again today. I speak about the lover archetype a lot, and I talk about the sovereign or the queen. And so just in the same way, these energy patterns of masculine and feminine are just archetypal patterns. No one owns them. They're archetypal energy patterns. And then we can then embody them as men and women. And so as a woman, my work has been very much, I naturally embodied a lot of masculine. That's a lot to do with my upbringing. I was brought up by a single father. And culturally, that's what we're rewarded and trained to do. And so for me, there was a real reclamation needed to be able to fall back into my feminine in all the ways that we're going to speak about. And that's what's available to all of us. Like, my work is never about saying to a woman, the way to be, how to do womanhood right is to be more feminine. Like, it's so not about that. This is always an expansion. It's always about, like, if we want to have this full embodied experience on this planet, wouldn't we want to be able to have more of this? And that's both. That's being able to have the agility and choice to wield the masculine. And when I say masculine, I'm going to now distill a bit more what I mean. I mean linear and structured and holding and direct, and more of the feminine, receptive and soft and fluid and non-linear. They both have a place. They're both powerful and beautiful and pure in their own right. They both have not just utility, but, you know, like something so much beyond that. Like, yes, they have utility, and they are what creates that like deep life of meaning. So that's what I mean when I talk about masculine and feminine. When I talk about men and women specifically, let me just pause for a moment, because I'm just wanting to sort of, like, again, not caveat, but really just make sure I'm speaking in a way that's most inviting. Okay, we're here in a group that's called When Women Speak and is predominantly filled with women, and this webinar is for women. And I love that. I love the fact that as much as our culture is questioning and creating conversations for other ways for people to identify and to express, for me, there is real value in recognizing, as women, there is beauty and power. The woman's body has beauty and power. As you know, through our work together, being able to be invited into this like deep relationship with our menstrual cycle, with the like softness and receptivity of our bodies, and seeing where our wounds are held, like that has real power in itself. Also talking about wounds, those kind of core wounds or sacred wounds that really hold our medicine, for women quite often, sadly, involve early sexual abuse. And I wish that wasn't so. It is something that, you know, as you know, comes up in pretty much every Wake the Wild Feminine circle. And I don't think pretending that isn't something that's like part of many women's journeys and is a core wound for many women. I don't think trying to say that women themselves don't have a space to be women and to be talked about as women with our bodies and our experiences and our wounds as they are is helpful. And so I kind of unashamedly say, whilst everyone, no matter who they are, however they identify, whatever their sexuality, can embody and express both the masculine and feminine, I do also see that speaking directly to women with all of our lived experience, all of what it means to be a woman in a woman's body, is also really precious and needed. Is there anything else I want to say before we dive in? I think just one more thing. When it comes to sexuality, my own lived experience and most of my work has been with heterosexual couples, where typically, and again, this isn't true for all of us, but typically the man has more of a draw to embody more of the masculine, and the woman has more of a draw to embody more of the feminine. That's not because they have to, that's not because anyone's telling them to, that is just to set like their natural rest point when they're culturally, when they've sort of freed that cultural conditioning and can choose into that. And so when I'm talking, just purely because of that, I'll often be using, if we start to talk about relationships, I'll often be talking about it from that kind of heterosexual lens. That's not because I think it's best, right, the only way or anything else. It's just my own lived experience, and also the experience of most of the people I work with. That's all. And so I just want to say that up front, like that isn't because that is the only way to be whatsoever. It just happens to be my own experience. I think that's all of the caveats out the way, Sarah.
Beautifully done. And no doubt there could still be disagreement, but and that's okay. Mm-hmm. That's okay. Like you say, with any conversation where we're going anywhere below the surface, there's going to be activation, and we welcome that. We welcome it all. So comments are welcome. If people want to comment, ask questions, please do so. Okay. I don't think there were any key questions that I had. So I get a sense that you were feeling into what you were going to share today. You've already said that you are wild with this. You're ready to just say whatever comes to say and really own your message. So please let us hear.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. Thank you. I'd love to start with this passage by Lucy Pearce, who writes beautifully on this topic. This particular piece I'm going to read, she names it as Medicine Woman, but you could call this Wild Woman, you could call this the Wild Feminine, any of these other ways that you can describe it. And what I love about this particular passage is I see the choice to walk this path of reclamation into the feminine. There's a point in our lives, and again, if we're fortunate in this culture, that we get to hear this call. We feel something within us, there's something more here for us. And I really want to speak about it in this way, because this isn't just a webinar. This isn't just me sitting here kind of saying, these are my views on the masculine, feminine, women. I really believe this is a very personal, unique journey that each of us at some point will get an invitation to. And it's maybe not for everyone that's on this webinar, but for those that it is the right time, this is what this is. And so I really want to kind of make that clear. If you're feeling some kind of stirring and some kind of calling as I'm speaking about these things, like, please take heed. This is, again, like, I feel like our birthright. Most of us haven't had this opportunity probably until now. Maybe this is your time. So I'm going to read this because I think it really gives a sense of what I mean by this. It may be the first day of your life, the prime of youth, or several decades in, when Medicine Woman calls you, your name on her list, her new initiate. She crept in while you were sleeping, when you overexerted, when you kissed him, or ate that, or lived there, or pushed too hard just one time too many. She crept in and curled up in your cells, your heart waiting to meet you, longing to know you, longing for you to know her at last. What feels like the end is in fact a beginning of a new road, an unknown path of pain and healing. She will show you how to slow down. She will run her fingers roughly through your life and help you sort out the busyness from what matters. She will show you how to find support and who you really are beyond your roles and expectations, and even more beyond the system the world has forced you into. She transports you into the timelessness of big pains and tiny joys, initiates you into your strength, into your love, into your courage, into a world beyond your control. She has sent me an invitation. I see yours too, tucked in your bag, amongst all the receipts and bills, the pens and the detritus of life. Take it out. It is time. And that's really the place I want us to be having this conversation. This is an invitation, it's permission, it's the start of a path that, again, I really feel is our birthright as women to be able to walk. And that path is the path of the soul. Whether you use that languaging or not, is that path back into who we uniquely are before we were tamed, before we were conditioned into this compelled way of living, where we just don't even have a sense, like it's not even something we pause to ask, is this for me? How do I feel about this? We're so used to running through that script of what will be acceptable, what will keep me safe. How does a nice woman show up? And from there, there's no conversation with who we really are. There's no conversation with a wild woman. There's no conversation with our soul. And so how the hell could we possibly live from there? And so this really, what I'm talking about, is a return to who we really are so we can make choices. And the word choice is such an important one. You'll know, Sarah, from our conversations, like that's really what it is returning to a place of sovereign choice where we can make contact with our desires, our values, and then look at the world around us and say, that's not for me. That is for me. Here's my boundary. I'm a yes to this. And we're doing that from a place of what's really for us. So that is really, I use the languaging of the feminine and sovereignty, but, strip away all the words. I think we all know the place I'm talking about. It may feel unfamiliar. It may feel unsafe even. I know that when I'm giving women invitations, that kind of first invitation to even like start walking that path, awaken more feminine, before they even know what that is. And again, I don't say that much. When, if you see the page, Awaken More Feminine, there isn't this clear sense of kind of, this is what it's going to be like, and this is what you're going to do. And this, like, I say very little about what the path will entail. And yet, women here, it's for them. They have, it may be the tiniest little sliver of knowing this is for me, and that's enough. And from there, they take that first step on the path. And then it gets to the point where there's this invitation. Do you want to live your life from here? Your whole life, all your life. And so the invitation I'll make is, are you willing to make that commitment to live a soul-led life? And again, this, there's a real terror of that. We're scared. We don't trust ourselves. We don't trust our wildness. We don't trust our soul. And I understand that absolutely, completely. I'm not making that wrong. I'm not dismissing why that's scary. But like, how sad is that? How sad is that we actually are terrified to live life from a place of what's for us? So I will actually share a bit about that. And you heard me talk about this the other day, Sarah. The thing that I see is, once we've made that commitment, and I think recognizing how scary and how big that is part of, that's important to recognize the enormity of that choice. And once we've made that choice, it's gentle and loving and as slow as we need it to be. That's what I found over and over again. Our souls have got our back. This word, whether we're saying like danger, wild or untamed, or living a soulful life, it's not going to make us do like crazy things that we just wouldn't want to do. Why would it? Why would it? And it's so funny. What we fear is having to do something we really wouldn't want to do, which makes no sense, because why would we have a deep longing to do something that just we wouldn't want to do? It makes no sense. And again, it's something that is just so loving and so gentle, and is kind of one breadcrumb step after another. And again, I really do feel like this is for all of us. There is so many reasons that we're going to put in the way of that. There are, and some of them are absolutely understandable. I think it can be really hard. I was having a conversation with a member of our Primal Happiness Facebook group about the book Untamed, and she was saying, but it's okay for her. You know, it's okay for her to free herself from conditioning and live as she was. You know, she's wealthy. Her husband had cheated on her. So there was kind of like no sense of her being the one that broken up the marriage. And I think that all of that's true. We all have our own privileges, and we all have our wounds. We all have the things that are going to be in the way. And I'm not dismissing any of that, but there is a point where we, again, if we're feeling that call deeply, we need to make the commitment despite that, despite the circumstances. And again, what I see over and over is once we've done that, we're supported. We're supported every step of the way. There is something, and I love what you said right at the start here, and you said, like, maybe I'll talk about this. You saying that point where you made the commitment to wake the wild feminine and magic started happening. That's because that is what happens. We make that commitment to ourselves and life lines up to help us. We will notice that those choices we're making that are from soul, we will get a big fat yes from the world out there too. And it's like, I'm not even going to try and like explain the mechanics behind that, but I see it over and over again to like a mind-blowing extent. Like every single time I lead women through this work, they will say things like you said, like, I can't believe it. This happened. I had this opportunity. I had a conversation with a woman the other day, and she was on this kind of like wobble. Should I go back into coaching? I don't know. Am I good enough? And she hadn't touched her kind of coaching Facebook page in years. And as we were on the call, she had someone like her Facebook page, which hadn't happened in a long time. And then immediately after, she had another one, like just from us having this private conversation. And this just happens all the time. I could give you, like, literally, I could spend the rest of the call giving examples like that, but I just see it over and over. Like, there is real trust needed to take that step. And when we do it, life rushes to support us. It really does. It isn't quite as this lonely, scary path as it might seem. And of course, you know, just as that quote talked about, there is pain. There is pain for sure. And I think that's because in order to go back and tend those wounds and to take the medicine from them, we need to experience what's there. That's the place where we no longer get the opportunity to put plasters over it, to bypass it, to transcend it. That's the hard part of this path. We need to meet ourselves, wounds and all, but we will get the support to do so. There's a quote here that I want to share from one of my absolute favorites. Anyone who knows me knows that I could probably quote her more than anyone. It's Clarissa Pinkola Estes, author of Women Who Run with the Wolves. And this is a really short quote. Wild Woman teaches women when not to act nice about protecting their soulful lives. And that's what I love. And that's why I love the archetype of the wild woman. But we need to learn, and you could say it's unlearn, but let's call it learn for the moment, how to start saying like no to the housework, no to that demand, no to that commitment, because what's more important is us living a soulful life. That comes first. And that's why we need to hold each other in this work. That's why we need to support each other. We need to model it. And again, I use this word activations. This is why it's really important to be able to speak really cleanly and powerfully to these things, because in doing so, we activate that wild woman archetype, that wild feminine in another woman. And then she hears the call. She knows it's okay. She knows it's safe. She's got permission to live that way too. So this is so much more than just an idea. This again is in us. This isn't something we need to go out and learn or somehow take from the world out there. This so much is something that's inside us that we can return back to and then live life from. Let me just take a mouthful and just pause and just see where I want to take this next, actually, because there's kind of the underlying path that's here, and then there's a kind of the stuff that shows up on the surface that and I think some of the questions you asked about this, Sarah, might be a good place to talk to, which is around that kind of, how do we get to that point where we're so restricted in our expression, where it's not safe to speak, it's not safe to be. So give me a moment to take a mouthful, and then I'll talk directly to that. So your questions, Sarah, let me just nip down to the note I took. So why women might find it difficult to show up and speak, and why many women seem to find it easier to write what they want to say than speak out loud. And probably you've already heard in some of what I've said, like, it's no wonder when we're existing through the lens of what is going to make me look nice, therefore what's going to keep me safe, there's a tiny amount available from that place. We've got this small range of options, and it almost never will include us speaking our truth. It will almost never include us speaking from soul. So from that place, is it any wonder at all that women don't feel safe to speak? Until we've been able to do that work of returning to ourselves and creating that internal sense of safety, which includes so many things, but including, again, with the wild woman archetype, when we bring that alive into our life, we then are back in touch with our intuition, our wild nature. That's part of what creates that sense of safety. We're not this kind of wide open to the world, naive, kind of like victim to anyone. In fact, there's another quote here that from our friend Clarissa that I think speaks to this. Here we go. Young girls are taught not to see, and instead to make pretty all manner of grotesqueries, whether they're lovely or not. This training is why the youngest sister, that's the youngest sister in the Bluebeard myth, the youngest sister can say, his beard isn't really that blue. This early training to be nice causes women to override their intuitions. In that sense, they are actually purposefully taught to submit to the predator. Imagine a wolf mother teaching her young to be nice in the face of an angry ferret or a wily diamondback rattler. And so from that place of being taught to be nice, how the hell can we be anything but? And when we let go of that, and again, that sounds really easy, like just let go of it. Again, this is the work of returning to ourselves. We switch on that natural protection. We understand what's safe. We understand what's for us. We're able to speak out our boundaries, and we're able to speak out our truth. And trying to ride over the top of that, whilst I think, I'm not in any way dismissing your work here with When Women Speaks, it is absolutely needed, and it is gorgeous, and itself, it creates some safety. This is a place that welcomes there, the containers there, that's perfect. The challenge is when a woman then tries to take her voice out into the world without having done that reclamation, without having that sense of the wild feminine and what's safe and what's not safe and her real power, how the hell can she do that? So that's why I really see that it can seem like we're just talking about quite surface level stuff, like, why can we speak? Why can't we speak? I need to speak, but recognize, like, this hasn't been safe. This hasn't been safe for generations and generations and generations. So we can talk about that as like the witch wound. We can talk about that as like just years and years and years of being taught, but also at a kind of DNA level, inherited, and understanding it's not safe. Just trying to ride over the top of that is not really going to serve us. I mean, apart from anything, that's going to fry our blooming nervous systems. And yet, again, it's not to say that we can't do this. The system out there isn't going to change anytime soon, and yet we can make this safe for us to show up fully. I really do believe that's possible. And from there, it's then possible for us to speak. We can speak our truth. We can speak freely. And again, this is what I love about this is we every time we do that, we give permission to another woman and another woman and another woman. One last thing on that, actually, which is, again, that work of returning to having some sense of what's for us. Another archetype I speak a lot about in Wake the Wild Feminine is the lover archetype. This is, again, that deep sense of our emotions, our senses, our values, our body, and our pleasure. And when we're able to experience life from that place, we have a sense of kind of what we value and our own value. And again, culturally, we've not been shown that's needed, welcome, safe. And so what we do is we shift into the shadow. We operate from the prostitute, and the prostitute's all about making deals. So she'll be saying, okay, if I kind of want this, but ultimately it's more important that I'm liked. It's more important that I'm safe. So I'll do that. And by doing that, I'll get that. And that makes, again, complete sense when that's the only power that's been available to us. And when we recognize that that thing that we've made the deal for is never, ever, ever worth what our deep expression is calling for. It never is. And again, it's like the thing I find not most surprising, because I understand it, but kind of like it hits me over and over again that to even notice that we've been doing this, to even notice how our shadow's been running the show and making these deals on our behalf, I see woman after woman like, wow, oh my goodness, I've been doing that to such an extent, I don't even know what I value. It's just not something that's even like the code just bypasses it. The code's been written so strongly to make deals from this prostitute shadow archetype. This is what will keep me safe. This is what will keep me loved. This will what keep me approved. We don't even have access to that beautiful lover that holds our values that lies before that. So again, there's so many reasons here why us not speaking, us not expressing ourselves in any way, shape or form, us not empowering our desires, us not showing up in the world as who we really are, like there is every blooming good reason not to do that. And when we are able to do this work to return to who we are, it is safe, beautiful, meaningful, precious, and like anything we could possibly want. The other thing I'd love to talk about, and is because you've just reminded me, Sarah, is the thing that we don't always use this language of the shadow that I'm talking about here, but we have a sense of it. I think we all have this sense of this kind of part of us that we've shoved down because we know it's not, people aren't going to like that about us. And this is usually because it's some trauma we've received in early childhood that's taught that this way of expressing ourselves or this way of being in the world is dangerous. And so we've shoved this down in shadow. And whether or not we're using that language, we all have a sense of these parts of ourselves that we know are not safe. And the beautiful part of doing this work is we get a chance to go back into shadow and reclaim the gold that was shoved down there. And when we're not willing to look there, we'll never know what that gold is. But I can absolutely promise you, in every single shadow, there is gold. And that gold could well be that kind of, what is our unique gift? And when I say unique gift, our unique gift is ultimately us. It's like who we are, who we be is our gold. But there'll be aspects of that have been shoved down in shadow that when we can reclaim it and bring it out into the world, it's a gift for us and it's a gift for the world. Is there anything else I want to say about any of that? Let me just take a quick look see if I've got through all the things I wanted to touch upon. One last thing. And I'm probably not going to get a chance to really do this justice in the time we've got, but you'd mentioned in your original question, Sarah, about what is it to be a king or queen? So again, the reason I use the language of the queen or the sovereign in my work isn't because I just think, oh, nice ego trip, like who doesn't want to be a queen? It's because in order to embody this full level of expression, what that's going to create in terms of activations in the world, what that's going to mean in terms of the level of power that we've got, requires a large degree of holding in terms of being able to make those choices with real discernment, but also responsibility for our impact. It's responsibility for what we're creating out there. And so that archetype of the queen, and bearing in mind what I said earlier about archetypal energy patterns, this is just an oldest time way of embodying a certain pattern of energy. That's really what we're talking about. And we know this at such a deep level. We don't really need to even explain the qualities of the queen much to have a sense of what that is. But really, we're talking about that level of grace and wisdom, and also benevolence, where we're able to wield this fullness of who we've become in a way that's actually serves the world. Like, that's really what a sovereign does. They're here as a gift and they're here to serve. So what that means, again, for me to embody the queen is to become, again, all the work we talked about up until this point. So that work of returning to our wildness, to really understand what's for us, to reclaim our gold from shadow, and then to like be that into the world, to have that deep sense of embodied safety and benevolence and wisdom. We can then really be that gift. We can serve. So it's anything but an ego trip. It's anything but being better than anyone. It's just a way of us allowing us to be a channel for really what I would call divine love. I think I've said everything I want to say, Sarah, but I'm really happy to answer any questions. Oh, you're on mute, honey.
Yeah, just realised I was muted. That was all absolutely delicious, gorgeous. We've had people commenting, not necessarily questions, but just that recognition is what's happening, which of course it will, won't it? So people just, commenting on how things that they were told as a child, don't show off, and yes. Be polite. All in, I mean, it's innocently done, but because I suppose it's that conditioning that just keeps perpetuating itself. I mean, I hear myself saying I've got 5-year-old twins, and I hear the words coming out.
Yeah.
But the amazing thing about that is, because I'm involved in this work, and have I hear it, I'm aware of it. Okay, right this moment it hasn't changed, the languaging hasn't changed, but I'm aware of it and I can do something about it. I can then correct, I can say, I didn't, that's not what I meant to say, what I meant, or whatever I need to do. So this, none of this exploration is about making wrong, but we have this wonderful opportunity to call ourselves out, to own up to things that we've said and done, and behavior that we now realize isn't the how we want to be in the world. So maybe just would you mind saying a little piece on that? Because I think sometimes we do shy away from showing up fully because we're not quite sure on how, or getting it right, and making mistakes, and then we just kind of like want to run and hide. So could you speak about any of that?
Yeah. So I think this is where it's tricky, because we're ultimately doing the work of reparenting and rewilding ourselves, but then as parents we're doing that simultaneously whilst trying to parent. And there's, unless we've been lucky enough to have done this work before we had children, and I see most women aren't, there is something that often is the case, that this kind of call into the feminine often happens after we're mothers. So it typically happens that we're on this journey and then trying to parent through that kind of conditioned lens that we've learned is like, this is what parenting looks like. And we end up, as you've just said, really innocently hearing ourselves speaking out that same conditioning of being nice, being nice. And so again, you know, that archetype of the queen, you know, part of that is to like call ourselves out when we notice that we've dropped below what our current standard is. And so if my current standard is to allow my children to be their wild, unique selves, when I notice I've dropped below that standard, is owning that and speaking that out. And also just to really, I think, again, this goes back to that commitment. You know, when we made that commitment to live a soul-led life, recognize as mothers, that includes our children, it includes how we parent. It can't exclude that for obvious reasons. And that's often where our greatest challenges will come. That's when we'll really start to notice where our shadows lie. I'll give you an example actually of something that happened with my daughter and I yesterday. And she, as anyone that's got young children at the moment who go to school, has got this kind of bombardment of schoolwork coming our way from the school. And I've sat down with my children and we've agreed a way of being in this time that prioritizes us being kind of like happy and healthy, them feeling kind of inspired and like happy to learn. And whatever that looks like is all good. It doesn't have to be what the school sends. And because as much as they've been raised to be wild and free, by the very act of sending them to school creates that sense of needing to behave within the conditioning. So even though we are constantly saying you can choose, it's totally okay. If a conversation needs to be had with your teacher, I will have it. You won't get in trouble. I will have that conversation with your teacher and I'll explain why we've chosen what we've chosen. Even so, they'll see comments from their friends where their friends will say, oh, have you done that piece of work? And I've emailed it to the teacher or whatever, and they'll start to worry. And my daughter yesterday was saying, we're going to go on that Zoom call with my class and I haven't done that piece of work. And will my teacher ask me about it? And I noticed my own sense of kind of fear, like, oh my goodness, oh, what is going to happen? Like, is she going to feel shamed? Is she going to get into trouble? And then noticing, because I can't be on that call, I can't, you know, speak for her, and then realize like, oh, this is an opportunity for me to actually empower her to be her wild self, not have to stand behind me. And I said to her, you've been given the opportunity to choose whatever you want to do. Yeah. You know that it's not about pleasing me. It's about pleasing yourself. Whatever you want to do, you please yourself. And in life, there'll be constantly people telling you that's the wrong thing to do. This time it might be your teacher. And in order for us to be people who can choose what we want to do, we need to notice that people will do that and then choose ourselves anyway. And I'll be here, I'll support you, but you really need to choose yourself here yourself. And she cried a bit and I said, you know, how do you feel about that? And she said, no, that's okay. I do want to not do it. And that might sound like a really, you know, simple example, but hey, she's a 9-year-old girl. You know, that's a powerful act to say, you know what? I know my classmates are going to think that I don't know, been lazy or kind of like I've got out of something they've done. My teacher might be cross with me, and choosing herself anyway. And so we will get opportunity after opportunity to notice where we're starting to put our narrative on them, where the world outside is going to put on their narrative on them, and do what we can to keep choosing their wildness anyway. Is there anything else that's I think, again, just recognizing the, like, shame never works. And that's whether we're shaming other people or shaming ourselves. Like, hey, we ended up here for really good reasons. Like, none of us chose to be in this like crazy culture, in this like weird domesticated way. Like none of us chose this, like we are where we are, and we're now doing the work to create some wildness in us. And that's a journey. We're not going to go straight there. And to have, you know, as you know, in Wake the Wild Feminine, I'm constantly saying, you know, like bring as much love to this as you can, bring as much compassion to you as you can, primarily for yourself. For yourself. Like that's how we can become open enough to transform, to heal, to expand. Like love is the power. I think that's everything I've got to say on that, Sarah.
Brilliant. We're coming towards the end, and I do want you to talk about the embodying, not embodying, is it embodying, the course that you've got about to start, literally about to start. So
yes.
but something that arose for me today was around that phrase, shame on you. And there was some shift around that, and almost like because it's kind of like that phrase is kind of said in a negative way, you know, putting, you know, shame on you for doing whatever. But I actually suddenly saw it as shame on you, where I could actually take that shame and turn it, and like transmute it, turn it into something else. So it's actually, rather than trying to do things to avoid shame, I just sensed this real opening to that shame. So I don't know, it just arose this morning, that yeah, we don't have to hide from and try and avoid shame. We can actually step into it, and then yeah, and do whatever's necessary from that space of really owning it.
Yeah, I love that you've I won't say too much this in the interest of time, but ultimately those wounds that we have, what we've placed in shadow, is shame. It is because of shame. It's the shame that's held in shadow and ultimately held in our body that we're talking about here. So anytime we are feeling that trigger, really, if we keep kind of going back and back and back, it's actually shame that's being triggered. It may not look like it on the surface level. It can look like irritation. It can look like embarrassment. It can look like revulsion. But we keep tracking back, it will have shame in it at its kind of roots. And so what I love in what you're saying here is, again, anytime we're willing to recognize like, oh yeah, the outside world isn't really the thing here. It's what's here for me. What's this here to teach me? How can I use this as an opportunity to heal? That's really what that's about. So I love that you've named that, Sarah. And again, it's not to mean that like, yeah, let's wield shame as a weapon out there, but to be able to alchemize it into this gold that we can bring into our life. Yeah, love that. Oh, do you want to now talk about unraveling the body?
Yes, please do, in case there's people listening that are like, how do I want to do more, how do I do more?
Yeah, so this is brand new. I just want to share very briefly the inspiration behind this, because the work of Waking the Wild Feminine that Sarah's been part of, it isn't I'm trying to like put this in a way that doesn't make it sound the worst thing ever either. It's not an easy path, let's say that. And apart from anything, I know for a lot of women, sitting in circle in that way where we're naked, we're not literally naked, although some of the pictures we share are verging on naked, but you know, you are absolutely like revealed and speaking your truth. And for many women, that is, again, for very good reason, really a painful thought. And so for that reason alone, they won't embark on the journey of Waking the Wild Feminine. There's also definitely some sense for women where they know, like, oh, I'm not ready. I know I'm going to end up looking at some really difficult stuff. And right now, I don't think I can hold that. And so I really respect that. And there's also, it's because it's limited. There's only 8 spaces. And once they've gone, and it always sells out. So every single time I end up having to turn women away, and I get women saying, oh my God, I really want to work with you. I really want to be part of this. And yet I don't feel I'm ready for this. And so after the last time, I was like, so what is there then? There's something here. What wants to be created? And it was unraveling the body. So this is I like to describe it as a bit kind of like a little sister to Waking the Wild Feminine. So the work is just as deep. It's just as much a kind of step on the path of the feminine, but we don't sit in circle together. And we're not going to kind of go really deep into looking into our wounds. This is very much that kind of absolutely essential part of the journey of understanding the power, the gifts, the and that kind of like restriction really that we've had in our body for very good reason, starting the work of unraveling it. I actually don't know what exactly that's going to look like yet. I tend to very much create kind of like as it comes through me, like both in terms of like the day before and then like right on the like time when we get together the first session. I'll have a sense of where I'm going to go, but very much similar to this, like I'll just see what wants to come out. But it'll be very much about understanding the power of things like our menstrual cycle, of being able to have that capacity to actually like relax and open and soften, like have that as part of a choice. Like for most women, that's not a choice. Start to do the work where that becomes a choice, to create some freedom in our bodies. Again, because we've been used to this masculine linear world, very, very, very few women, unless they've been lucky enough to do something like an ecstatic dance class, very few women will have moved their body in a way that it wants to move. And when they first hear that, like, well, I'm sure I do. I'm sure I, and then you can see they're like questioning it, like, I don't. When do I? I actually don't ever move my body as it wants to move. I'm just constantly doing things for productivity reasons. Or I'll kind of go to a dance class or an exercise class, but I'm not moving how my body wants to move. I'm moving according to what the kind of, the routine is or the teacher's saying. And so all of these things are part of us reclaiming our wildness, and first and foremost through the medium of our body, which is where it really has to start. So that's what this will be. It's also the lowest investment live thing probably I've ever done, but certainly I've done in years. I've made it intentionally hopefully affordable for most. It's £99. And again, it'll be 6 live sessions, a Facebook group, lots of recommendations of resources, practices. A number of the practices are the same that you're used to in Wake the Wild Feminine, Sarah, that's specifically about the body. And I think, I mean, I don't know whether it will become something I keep doing, but I'm very excited about this. This feels like a kind of perfect, that first breadcrumb step along the path I spoke about. I think this could be it. So yes, that's at, if you want to go and have a look, that's at primalhappiness.co, unravel. How do you spell unravel? UNRAVEL. And I'm sure you'll share links and stuff as well, Sarah. But yeah, go check that out. It's it'll be open for the next week or so, and I don't think I'm going to restrict on numbers. So as long as you kind of get yourself in and get yourself signed up, you'll be there.
Wonderful. So it officially starts.
I don't know. Something of May. I'm absolutely
okay.
Dates and numbers. Let's have a look. It's I have no idea. When does it start? I know. It's Wednesday, the 13th of May.
Wednesday, the 13th of May. Okay, yeah. So there's certainly time to book on if feeling called, drawn, interested to do that. And yes, pop a link in the comments, and then people can check that out. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
This has been lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, it wasn't as terrifying to reveal all as it could have been. I'm sure that has a lot to do with your gorgeous welcomes. Thank you so much, Sarah.
And I hope that you'll come again and speak, because I feel that yes, it definitely went deep, but I know there's so much more.
There really is. There really is, and I'm very happy to do so. as Sarah knows, like I can speak at that kind of, foundational deep level, but I'm also really happy to talk to, like practical questions, practical examples too. So if you've heard some of what I've talked about and you're like, well, how would that work in this situation? Or I'm in this setting, how on earth could I possibly do that? Do ask. And if it looks like there's appetite for it, I'm happy to come back and talk to those questions.
Yeah, that was my feeling. I think, we've given people a wonderful flavor, real juicy stuff. And yeah, if questions come in, comments come in, then we can look at doing something else. Or maybe you can just go live on your own with answering some of them. That would be wonderful. Okay. It'd be wonderful. Thank you so much, Leanne. The way you hold space in the circles, and I know it'll be the same in, for the unraveling the body as well. The safe container that you put together is profoundly moving. And I mean, the call that I had with you prior to even being in circle, I was the level of safety that you provided so that I could actually go to those depths, go into that shadow and say, this is me, this is the fullness that wants to come out. That's what you've given to me, and I will be forever grateful. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. Thank you so much, Sarah. Love you lots.
Love you too.